A routine expedition. Captain Vakor sat in his command chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen as the stars streaked by. The Zorax, a sleek survey vessel of the Galactic Imperium, cruised through the void of space, seeking new worlds to explore and civilizations to enlighten. "Captain, we're approaching the edge of a new solar system," announced Navigator Zeltak, his long fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Sensors indicate 8 planetary bodies orbiting a yellow dwarf star. Vakor leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Excellent. Any signs of intelligent life?" Science Officer Kilmore, a slender figure with pale blue skin, looked up from her display. "Preliminary scans suggest the third planet from the star bears the hallmarks of an industrial civilization. Atmospheric pollutants, radio wave emissions, and evidence of large-scale construction are present." A murmur of excitement rippled through the bridge crew. It had been cycles since they had encountered a new species, and the prospect of being the first to make contact was tantalizing. Vakor stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Intriguing. What level of technology have they achieved?" Kilmore consulted her readouts. "Based on the limited data available, I estimate they have attained level 3 on the Karish scale, early space flight capabilities, but no indication of faster-than-light travel or advanced weapon systems." A predatory grin spread across Vakor's face. The Imperium had subjugated countless primitive races, absorbing their resources and technologies into its ever-expanding dominion. This new species would be no different. "Helm, set a course for the third planet," Vakor commanded. "Let us see what this civilization has to offer." As the Zorax altered its trajectory, Kilmore continued to study the long-range sensor data. There was something unusual about this world, a nagging feeling that they were missing a vital piece of information. "Captain, I'm detecting an anomaly in orbit around the planet," Kilmore reported, her brow furrowed. "A high concentration of artificial satellites and what appear to be space stations." Vakor dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "They're probably just learning to explore their own star system. Nothing we haven't seen before." But as the Zorax drew closer, Kilmer's unease grew. The sheer number of satellites was staggering, far more than any level 3 civilization should possess. And there was something else. Whispers of electromagnetic chatter that hinted at a far more advanced understanding of technology than they had initially assumed. Kilmore adjusted her scanners, focusing on the largest space station positioned at the planet's Lagrange point. Its sleek lines and massive size spoke of engineering capabilities far beyond anything they had anticipated, and were those weapons emplacements bristling along its hull. Vakor, too absorbed in his visions of conquest to heed Kilmore's warnings, ordered the communications officer to open a channel to the planet's surface. It was time to announce the Imperium's arrival and demand the subjugation of this new species. Little did they know that in doing so, they were about to confront a civilization unlike any they had encountered before, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place within it. As the first human transmission reached the Zorax's bridge, Captain Vakor and his crew were wholly unprepared for what they were about to experience. Disturbing discoveries. As the Zorax approached Earth, the bridge crew busied themselves with their assigned tasks, eager to learn more about this new world and its inhabitants. Science Officer Kilmore focused her attention on the planet's orbital infrastructure, her mind racing as she tried to reconcile the advanced technology with the Imperium's initial assessment. "Captain Vakor, I've completed my analysis of the satellite network," Kilmore reported, her voice tinged with a mix of awe and apprehension. "The sheer number and complexity of these satellites are unprecedented for a level 3 civilization. They appear to serve a variety of functions: communications, navigation, surveillance, and even weapons platforms." Vakor's eyes narrowed. "Weapons platforms? Are you certain?" Kilmore nodded grimly. "Yes, Captain. I've detected high-energy signatures consistent with directed energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. This planet is heavily defended." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. A primitive species with such advanced orbital defenses was unheard of. What other surprises lay in store for them? Communications Officer Ralzak, a burly figure with a perpetual scowl, spoke up. "Captain, I've been monitoring the planet's transmissions. I think you should hear this." With a tap of his console, Ralzak routed the audio to the bridge speakers. The sound of human voices filled the air, speaking in a language the Zorax's translation matrix struggled to decipher. Snippets of conversation emerged. Talks of war, weapons of mass destruction, and a history of conflict that spanned centuries. Images flashed across the view screen, accompanying the transmissions. Scenes of battlefields, mushroom clouds, and cities reduced to rubble. It painted a picture of a species with a violent past and a terrifying capacity for destruction. Captain Vucker gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning pale. He had led countless conquests, but never had he encountered a civilization so seemingly primitive yet so well-versed in the art of war. "Kilmore, what have you learned about their military capabilities?" Vucker asked, his voice strained. The science officer hesitated, as if afraid to give voice to her findings. "From what I can gather, they have harnessed the power of the atom and developed weapons capable of wiping out entire cities. Their armies number in the millions, and they have a history of engaging in global conflicts. This is unlike anything we've encountered before." Vakor felt a chill run down his spine. He had always believed the Imperium to be the pinnacle of military might, but now he found himself questioning that assumption. "Captain, what are your orders?" asked First Officer Zarvid, a tall, wiry figure who had served alongside Vakor for decades. Vakor was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. To conquer this world would require a far greater force than the Zorax alone, and even then the cost in lives and resources would be immense. Yet to turn back now would be to admit weakness, something the Imperium could never tolerate. "We proceed as planned," Vakor said at last, his voice firm. "But we must approach with caution. Ralzak, open a channel to the homeworld. We need to inform the High Command of our findings and request further instructions." As Ralzak worked to establish a secure connection, Vakor couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something momentous, a turning point in the Imperium's history. And as he looked upon the blue-green world below, a sense of unease grew in the pit of his stomach. A fatal miscalculation. The Zorax maintained a cautious distance from Earth as Captain Vakor awaited a response from the Imperium's High Command. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the potential consequences of their discovery. Hours turned into days, and still no word came from the homeworld. Vakor grew restless, pacing the length of the bridge as he debated their next move. The longer they delayed, the greater the risk of being detected by the humans. "Captain, we can't just sit here indefinitely," First Officer Zarvid said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to take action before they realize we're here." Vakor nodded, his jaw set with determination. "You're right, Zarvid. We'll show these primitives the might of the Imperium. Helm, set a course for the nearest military satellite. We'll destroy it as a demonstration of our power." Science Officer Kilmore looked up sharply, alarm etched on her delicate features. "Captain, I must advise against this course of action. We still don't fully understand their capabilities. Provoking them could lead to disastrous consequences." But Vakor was beyond reason, his pride and ambition blinding him to the potential risks. "Nonsense, Kilmore. We have the superior technology. They'll cower before us like all the others." As the Zorax closed in on the targeted satellite, Vakor ordered weapons to be charged and locked onto the human craft. The ship thrummed with power as the energy cannons prepared to fire. "Target locked, Captain," reported Tactical Officer Drenlock, his finger hovering over the firing controls. "Fire," Vakor commanded, his voice cold and resolute. A searing beam of energy lanced out from the Zorax, slicing through the void of space and striking the human satellite with devastating precision. The craft exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its debris scattering across the orbital plane. For a moment, the bridge crew held their collective breath, waiting for a response from the planet below. Surely, the humans would realize the futility of resistance and surrender to the might of the Imperium. But the response that came was not one of submission, but of fury. Alarms blared throughout the Zorax as sensors detected a massive surge of energy from the planet's surface. "Captain, multiple objects launching from the planet." Kilmore cried out, her voice trembling. They're warships." Vakor stared at the viewscreen in disbelief as a fleet of human vessels rose from the atmosphere, their hulls bristling with weapons and shielding. They were far larger and more heavily armed than the Zorax, dwarfing the Imperium ship like a school of predators circling a hapless prey. "Impossible," Vakor whispered, his face draining of color. "How could they have such advanced ships?" As the human fleet closed in, Vakor realized the true extent of his miscalculation. He had underestimated the humans, and now his crew would pay the price for his arrogance. "Evasive maneuvers," Vakor shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Get us out of here." But it was too late. The human ships surrounded the Zorax, their weapons locked and ready to fire. Vakor's heart sank as he realized the terrible truth. They were completely outmatched. In that moment, as he stared into the face of his own hubris, Vakor knew that the Imperium had made a grave mistake. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and now the galaxy would tremble before the fury of humankind. The humbling of the Zorax. Captain Vakor gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white with tension as the human warships loomed on the viewscreen. The sleek, angular vessels dwarfed the Zorax, their hulls shimmering with an iridescent sheen that spoke of advanced materials and technologies far beyond anything the Imperium had encountered. "Captain, their ships are closing in fast," Navigator Zeltak reported, his voice trembling. "They're using some kind of propulsion system we've never seen before." Vakor watched in horrified fascination as the human ships moved with impossible grace and speed, their engines flaring with a brilliant blue-white light. In a matter of moments, they had surrounded the Zorax, their weapons trained on the Imperium vessel with unerring precision. Science Officer Kilmore worked frantically at her console, trying to analyze the human technology. "Captain, I'm detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Their shields are impenetrable, and their weapons, by the stars, they could vaporize us with a single shot." Vakor felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. He had led countless conquests, subjugating primitive species with ease, but now he found himself on the receiving end of a technologically superior force. The irony was not lost on him. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Vakor ordered, his voice strained. "We must negotiate." Communications Officer Ralzak shook his head, his expression grim. "They're not responding, Captain. They're jamming all our frequencies." Vakor's heart sank as he realized the humans had no interest in negotiation. They had been provoked, and now they were out for blood. Suddenly, the Zorax shuddered violently as a massive energy beam slammed into its shields. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the lights flickered and consoles sparked. "Direct hit," First Officer Zarvid reported, his voice rising above the chaos. "Shields down to 20%. Vakor knew they had only one chance for survival. "Helm, get us out of here. Full retreat." But even as the Zorax strained to escape, the human ships matched its every move, their superior engines allowing them to easily overtake the Imperium vessel. Another barrage of weapons fire rocked the ship, sending crew members sprawling across the bridge. Kilmore, her face ashen, looked up from her console. "Captain, our engines are failing. We can't outrun them." Vakor slumped in his chair, the weight of his failure crushing him. He had led his crew to their doom, underestimating an adversary that had proven to be far more formidable than any they had faced before. As the human ships closed in for the kill, Vakor could only watch in numb horror as the viewscreen filled with the sight of their weapons powering up, the brilliant glow of their energy cannons casting an eerie light across the bridge. In that moment, Vakor realized that the Imperium had made a fatal error. They had believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy, but now they had met their match. The humans were not a primitive species to be conquered, but a force to be reckoned with. And as the final barrage of human weapons fire tore through the Zorax's hull, Vakor knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The balance of power had shifted, and the Imperium would have to adapt or perish in the face of this new reality. A desperate escape. The Zorax shuddered and groaned as the human weapons tore through its hull, the once pristine corridors now filled with smoke and the acrid stench of burning circuitry. Captain Vakor clung to his chair as the ship lurched and shook, his mind racing with the grim realization that their mission had turned into a fight for survival. "Captain, our engines are down," Navigator Zeltak cried out, his fingers flying across the console. "We're dead in the water." Vakor gritted his teeth, his eyes darting across the damage reports scrolling across the view screen. The Zorax was crippled, its shields shattered and its weapons offline. They were at the mercy of the human fleet, and he knew all too well what fate awaited them if they surrendered. Science Officer Killamore staggered to Vakor's side, her face smudged with soot and her eyes wide with fear. "Captain, we must abandon ship," she urged, her voice raw with desperation. "We can't win this battle, but we might still be able to save the crew." Vakor hesitated, his pride warring with his sense of duty. To flee would be to admit defeat, to acknowledge that the Imperium had met its match. But as he looked around at the terrified faces of his crew, he knew that he had no choice. "Very well," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Zarvid, issue the order to abandon ship. Get everyone to the escape pods." As the crew scrambled to evacuate, Vakor turned to Rulzak, his communications officer. "Send a message to the homeworld," he commanded, his voice low and urgent. "Inform the High Command of what has transpired here. They must know what we have encountered." Rulzak nodded grimly, his fingers already dancing across the console as he composed the message. Vakor watched as the words scrolled across the screen, a stark admission of their failure, and a warning of the threat that humanity posed. With the message sent, Vakor turned to Killamore and Zarvid, his most trusted officers. "We must ensure that the humans do not capture any of our technology," he said, his voice steely with determination. "Set the self-destruct sequence. We'll give the crew time to escape, then blow the Zorax to atoms." Killamore looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Captain, what about you?" she asked softly. "You're coming with us, aren't you?" Vakor shook his head, a sad smile playing across his lips. "No, Killamore. I'm the captain. I'll go down with the ship." Zarvid opened his mouth to protest, but Vakor silenced him with a raised hand. "Get to your escape pods," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. "That's an order." As Killamore and Zarvid reluctantly turned to leave, Vakor settled back into his chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The human ships loomed before him, their weapons still trained on the crippled Zorax. He wondered what they would make of his final message, and whether they would understand the true scope of what they had achieved. In the end, as the last of the escape pods jettisoned from the Zorax, and the self-destruct sequence counted down to 0, Vakor felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had failed in his mission, but he had protected his crew and ensured that the Imperium would learn from his mistakes. And as the Zorax exploded in a blinding flash of light, Vakor's final thoughts were of the humans and the new era that they had ushered in. The galaxy would never be the same, and the Imperium would have to learn to live in a universe where they were no longer the undisputed masters. An unsettling future. The human fleet moved efficiently through the debris field left by the destruction of the Zorax, their ships' powerful scanners sweeping the area for any signs of survivors. On the bridge of the flagship, the HMS Prometheus, Admiral Elena Ivanova watched the operation with a steely gaze, her mind already racing with the implications of this unprecedented encounter. "Admiral, "We've located several escape pods," reported Lieutenant Commander Mikhail Petrov, his voice crisp and professional. "They're broadcasting a distress signal on a frequency we've never seen before." Ivanova nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Bring them aboard, Commander. We had a lot of questions for our visitors." As the escape pods were towed into the Prometheus hangar bay, Ivanova couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the technology on display. The pods were sleek and streamlined, their hulls made of a material that seemed to shimmer and shift in the light. It was clear that these aliens were far more advanced than any civilization humanity had encountered before. The pods hissed open, revealing the battered and bruised forms of the Zorax's surviving crew members. They blinked in the harsh light of the hangar bay, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty as human marines surrounded them, weapons at the ready. Ivanova stepped forward, her uniform pristine and her bearing regal. "I am Admiral Elena Ivanova of the Terran Space Fleet," she said, her voice carrying across the hangar. "You are now in the custody of the United Nations of Earth. You will be treated humanely, but we have many questions that need answers." As the aliens were led away to be processed and interrogated, Ivanova turned to her second-in-command, Captain Marcus Holloway. "This changes everything," she said softly, her eyes distant. "We always suspected we weren't alone in the universe, but to have proof of an advanced civilization right on our doorstep." Holloway nodded grimly. "And one that was willing to attack us without provocation," he added, his voice hard. "We got lucky today, Admiral. If they had been just a little bit more advanced." Ivanova held up a hand, her expression troubled. "I know, Marcus, but let's not dwell on what-ifs. We need to focus on what comes next." Over the next few weeks, the human scientists and engineers pored over the alien technology, reverse engineering what they could and marveling at the rest. The interrogations of the surviving Zorax crew members painted a picture of a vast, ruthless empire that had conquered countless worlds and subjugated countless species. But as the shock of the initial encounter wore off, a new realization began to dawn on the people of Earth. They had faced an existential threat and emerged victorious. They had proven that humanity was not just another primitive species to be crushed underfoot, but a force to be reckoned with on the galactic stage. In the halls of power, debates raged about the future course of human space exploration and defense. Some argued for a policy of isolation, focusing on fortifying Earth and its colonies against any potential threats. Others called for a more proactive approach, reaching out to potential allies and establishing humanity as a major player in the galactic community. Through it all, Ivanova couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Zorax had been humbled, but they were just one empire among many. There would be others out there, watching and waiting to see how humanity would respond to this new reality. As she looked out at the stars from the observation deck of the Prometheus, Ivanova knew that the future was uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity would face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same courage, determination, and ingenuity that had brought them to this point. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity would be ready to take its place among the stars.